Sad news out of Corona, Queens. Tough Tony, Anthony Federici, has passed away at age 82. Most known for owning and operating the Parkside Restaurant. How well did you know him, Greg?
Uh, I didn't know him well. I've known him since the 1980s, and Sonny was really good friends with him, and that's basically how I knew him, and through a few other people. Uh, Him and Sonny had a mutual admiration for each other. Sonny always wanted to go to Parkside when he was in a nursing home, and him and Tony would, talk. And him and Tony were really good friends. They knew each other for like 50 years, and they had mutual respect for each other, admiration. Uh, the place was a top-notch restaurant. They had the best food. Um, Tony was there every day. He was a hands-on guy. The place was spotless. The food was great. Uh, I had a couple of hiccups with Tony over the years. One was going back to 2005. I had gotten paroled on a parole violation, and they sent me down to Queensboro on Van Dam Street. And while I was there, waiting for my date to go home, was just a holding pen at this time, not a work release facility. They put an informer next to me, which they did a lot of times. They had me on record as being somebody or knowing Sonny Franzese or whatever. So every time an informer came in, they tried to get close to me. And this guy was an Irish guy. He worked for the Long Island Railroad. He was a bookmaker. I imagine he booked bets with Tony. He was a big spender. Spent a lot of money in Tony's restaurants, and had become friends with him. And his wife was friends with Tony's wife. I believe her name was Lorraine. Anyway, the guy was asking me a lot of off-color questions about Tony. Was he selling illegal Cuban cigars at the time that were like a hot subject? Uh, did he sell drugs? He asked me a lot of things about him, and I told him I don't know the guy, and he insisted, "Oh, you know everybody and this and that," which told me that somebody had planted him next to me. So when I was leaving to go home before him, a few days before him, he said to me, "Listen, whatever you do, don't tell Tony you've seen me. He thinks I'm in Florida." So at that point, I went and seen the counselor downstairs in Queensboro. And the counselor looked up his name, and it was two names. They were common Irish names. And one was 63 and one was like 43. So I said, "It's the guy who's 43." And the counselor said, "Oh, yeah, he's here right now." He told me where his location was, his bed number, whatever. I said, "Yeah, that's the guy." And he says, "Boy, this guy walks around with a lot of dimes in his pocket." He said, "Man, he has a lot of arrests, 8 felonies and what have you." So he got a 1 to 3. He had serious drug charges, and somewhere along the line, when his court date came up where he was going to get sentenced, I imagine he told Tony that he was going to Florida. He said something about his father was sick and he'd be back in about a year. So when I got out, the first thing I did was go to Parkside. It was about I must have got there about 10:30 in the morning. It was closed, but I walked around the park, and one of Tony's guys, a made guy, Rom, they called him Romanello, good guy. He was sitting there, and I started talking to him, and he didn't remember me at first, but then when we talked, he said, "Oh yeah, I remember you." And when we talked, I told him this story about this guy asking a lot of questions about Tony. So he said to me, "You think you can come back here in an hour? Uh, uh, I think Tony would like to talk to you." I said, "Yeah." So I just walked around. I had nothing to do. Had no car. I didn't even really have any money. I went back an hour, and Tony was there in his sweatsuit, and Romanello was there. We're in the park. They were sitting on the same side of each other, and I was across from them. And I told Tony this story, and Tony said, first thing he said was, "He told me he was in Florida." I said, "No, he's not in Florida. He's in jail." And after I told him the whole story, Tony said to me, "Man, I owe you. I owe you big time." And I said, Tony, you don't owe me anything, but I could really use a job. Everybody that I knew is gone, and I don't have any connections like I used to. Uh, and he says, I don't know. He said, talk to me another time or something. And I was a little taken back by that. I felt I did him a good favor. All in all, he was a good guy. He just kept everybody at arm's length. I think being associated with John Franzese Jr. didn't do me any favors.
No, I can imagine why not. Tony himself was very elusive. In the news reports recently, it came out that he was actually the consigliere of the Genovese crime family. Why do you think he remained so elusive?
First of all, Tony knew a lot of lawyers with big time connections in Manhattan, in Long Island, in Queens. Uh, he had become friends with people in law enforcement, the PBA, and this group and that group, and political groups. And I think he had some inside knowledge of things or whatever. He was very careful, especially in the last, like I'd say, 20 years or whatever. Nobody was getting beat up. Nobody was getting killed. There was no public outcry. Uh, but they did want him, and they just were never able to get him. He was a smart guy. He knew how to insulate himself. He had people around him, not Ori Spatto or John Franzese Jr. He had legitimate people around him that were loyal. Even the people in his restaurant, you'd go there and you go there 15 years later and the same people work there.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to say, many years ago, I think it was the 70s, if I remember, late 70s, maybe early 80s, there was a park across the street from Parkside Restaurant. I guess that's why they call it Parkside. There was a whole bunch of drug dealers in there, and he cleaned everybody out of there, cleaned up the park. He put in bocce ball court. He put in seats there. He was good to the neighborhood. That was his neighborhood. He grew up there as a kid, and he loved that neighborhood. It was changing over the years, but he still managed to do good there. He was very, very successful.
Yeah, I just had some video playing of Tony being interviewed. And here are a few photos of Sonny actually at Parkside Restaurant on a few occasions. He really enjoyed that restaurant.
Yeah, my friend Joe, I wasn't a kind of guy. I mean, I'm not Jimmy Calandra, just take a picture of wise guys and stuff like that. But and I didn't want to take a picture of Tony with Sonny because just asking that would have been a little off color, and they both were convicted felons, which could have hurt Sonny if if I was a Jimmy Calandra type guy to hand a picture over to the FBI or something like that. So I never really took too many pictures of him. My friend Joe, he took him to Parkside more than me. Joe must have took him there 3 dozen times. Most of the times they didn't pay. Sometimes they did. Uh, so Sonny loved that place, so he always wanted to go there. Whoever came to see him, um, there wasn't as many people as you think. He'd say, "Let's go to Parkside. Let's go to Parkside." I like going to different places. I would take him to Brooklyn, his old neighborhood, to Carmine's. I'd take him to a diner. I'd take him different places. The one thing I didn't like about Parkside with Sonny was that the bathrooms were downstairs. There was no bathroom upstairs. So if he had to go to the bathroom, man, it was a job. You better have, two people with you to, walk him down the stairs and stuff like that. And then try to get him back up there.
Yeah, I remember when we took him to go get his eyeglasses, it was just one giant step into the building. There wasn't any ramp. Who knows when that building was made? Probably over 100 years ago.
Well, another thing, the Parkside restaurant was really well known. I don't even know how long it's there. I know it was there from at least the 70s. I think I read somewhere in 1960 that Sonny's parents had started that. Um, it got really big. The place was packed all the time. As soon as it hit about 12:30, the place was packed. The bar was packed with business people. At night, you never know who would be there. Burt Young, I seen Burt Young there, who was from Rocky. He played Rocky's brother-in-law. There was always actors there. So it was like a cool place to go to, you know.
Do you remember some of the last times you spoke to Tony?
Another time, like I said, with Tony was this, and other people have said the same thing. I went in there one day and I told him that my stepfather's family were from Calabria, and I guess his family is from there. And we started talking and what have you. And I told him a little bit about my grandfather and my stepfather and his cousins who grew up in South Jamaica. And he started talking about his father. He had a hell of a lot of admiration for his father. And he told me that he hasn't visited his father's grave since he died. He said he just can't get himself to go there. I had the same thing with my stepfather. I always remember him being alive, and I just kind of like gruesome. I didn't. I was really connected to my stepfather, and he was connected to his father, and you know. So some days you talk to him about things or whatever. You could talk to him about racquetball, talk about other things. Other times you come in there, he'd shake your hand, say hello, and it wasn't much of a conversation.
Yeah.
I can't really blame him. I mean, especially these days, you can't trust anybody. You don't see people for years and what have you. You don't know if they have a wire on or something like that. I don't think he ever worried about me. I mean, I went and I actually helped him. For me to, try to hurt him would go against what I did, the first time.
Well, he was a legitimate businessman. He had to be careful.
I'll give him this. He was worth a lot of money. He was worth millions. Just his property alone, where it was and everything, it got bigger and bigger. He started buying more property and adding parking and different stuff like that, making the restaurant bigger. He was always working. He always had a schmuck on. He'd be dressed nice with a schmuck over it, and he'd have a cigar, a big cigar, always hanging in his pocket. And he would go in the kitchen. He would actually cook. He would supervise everything. He would, greet everybody at each table, and he was good at what he did. Uh, he reminded me a lot of another Genovese guy I knew when I was younger. I actually knew his kids. Zuki Esposito. He started El Cortil on Mulberry Street. Me and you were down there one time, Nick, many years ago. A really nice restaurant too. He would, greet everybody and, maybe give you, something for free, a dessert or some coffee or give you some wine. And he was very warm and uh, very successful at what he did. And people wanted to get to, a feel of these guys, the aura of them being, in the mob and being an owner and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Did Tony have any family that may be running the restaurant now?
I never met his wife. I never met his children. I had heard something about one of his sons that was stabbed. I don't know if he was killed or whatever. I was pretty sad to hear that. Um,
Oh, I didn't even know that about him. I'm sorry to hear that.
it's on the internet somewhere. I don't want to talk about stories that are already out there and stuff like that. But
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk about Tough Tony. Like I said, passed away at age 82. Our condolences to his friends and family. And thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Greg.
okay, you're welcome. Take care.
If you would like to support the channel, please check out our Patreon, where members will get access to our entire media catalog, including bonus videos, shoutouts, and even get a chance to have your questions answered by Greg. As usual, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.